Hey everybody, and welcome to Indigo Sky Holistic. My name is Davina, and I'm an energy healer, intuitive holistic therapist, and spiritual mentor. And I'm based here at Soul Wellness Hub, where I am sat today in my therapy room. And I'm sharing a little bit of a personal story today, I guess. A little bit of a share about where I am in my life and where I've been, some little backstories and some little things that I've been moving through and letting go of and moving past. And it's going to be part of I'm going to create a very specific EFT. And if you've been looking at my channel recently and you've seen the EFT for Extra Witnesses, it's not one of them. This is something completely different. Although it is actually associated, some of it's associated with some of the patterns and stories that I grew up with around worthiness in a high control religion that told me that I had to put that first to like the negligence, I guess, of everything else, particularly my interests, I guess now what I see as my purpose, mission on the planet. One of the things that was kind of spoken against following within that religious structure was higher education. So you were generally expected to go off and become a full-time preacher, evangelizer, minister, pioneers they call them, and that is what I did. And they would say back then, like 30 years plus ago, that following a higher education path took you away from God and took you away from dedicating your life whole soul to this preaching mission that they'd put in. So I did go to college, but I didn't really enjoy it, and it truly was business administration. It's really not my interest and passion at all. Is not business administration. My passion always was health, wellness. That was where I ended up being, or customer facing. Like my first actual, I guess, part-time work was shop work, and I loved it. I loved visual merchandising and I loved customer interaction. And then I went from there into care work, and that was like I think I spent like a week or 2 weeks doing care work, and it wasn't really hands-on care at the time initially, but I was just like, wow, I love this. Like, this is the last thing I thought I'd love, but I absolutely love it. And as I progressed through care work, the more I went into healthcare, the more I went into nursing care within nursing homes, residential homes, and then finally hospitals, the more I fell in love with the like health and wellness and holistic. If you've read any of my about me stuff on my website, the holistic approach to well-being was always something that I'd been interested in. I'd always been interested in alternative or more natural or older forms of healing, medicine, and that side of things rather than the medical side of things. But I was naive, didn't know much, and again had been like guided away from a lot of the things that I do now as an energy healer because of religion. So bring me to the point of this first part of what I'm sharing today is in relation really to not following higher education, not being encouraged to follow my dreams, not even knowing what my dreams were, because my dreams were kind of put into me by religious organization and dogma. Not really knowing what my interests were, because anything that I'd have expressed interest in wouldn't have been furthering their work as a religious organization. It wouldn't have been seen as furthering God's work, although when I think about how I channel energy now and how I'm an energy intuitive, I'm probably closer to what anybody may deem God now than I was then, strangely. But although I did actually feel like I had a very good connection with God, but now I know it was my energy and frequency and my faith and belief and trust in the higher power and energy that I felt like I was connecting with, which is the same as what I feel I'm connecting with now. Because of this like discouragement from following your dreams, if you like had an aspiration or a dream to be an astronaut or be even a doctor, or even as my desires to be a nurse. I had a friend who studied nursing as a mature student, and even that, going to university and doing that, it was kind of frowned upon. It was kind of like, you know, not something that was encouraged, even as a mature student, to go from going to university and studying a nursing degree. It was literally like, you know, not encouraged. So if you wanted to go and say, you know, I want to be a doctor or I want to be a lawyer, they would have basically discouraged that sort of studying. And lots of people who did choose to study academically would, well, leave the religion, I guess, because they became more studious, more academically aware, began to, I guess now I know it's released some of the brainwashing indoctrination that's there. Because when you're not actually sat in front of the thing that's brainwashing you week after week, you begin to wake up, you begin to see different perspectives and different points of view. So this was something that was so discouraged that to follow a academic path or to follow a passion or an interest in something, being discouraged. Lots and lots of people who are very good, devout Jehovah's Witnesses are settling for lowly lifestyles, because also there's the whole idea of, which comes with a lot of religion, that the love of money, or money itself, is the root of all evil, that putting a desire for a successful and bountiful, I'm going to use those words, but they would deem it as materialism and deem it as being like wanting to have like worldly goods, and they'd make that out to be something that took you away from God. Now, all the things that I've studied and read and the inner work that I've done around money mindset and financial frequency, wealth and abundance and success and the desire to have completion in your life so that you feel more able to follow your dreams and passions. And they're all like interconnected and they're all interwoven. And just because somebody is successful and wealthy doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them evil. Just because somebody is poor and poverty stricken and living in the gutter doesn't make them a good person. It doesn't make them happy. It's like, it's not the money, it's not the success, it's not the wealth and the material goods that people have that make them nice people to be around, or people that you don't really want to cross paths with. That's what's within people themselves. And what actually happens is when people have more abundance in their life, when people are following their dreams, when people are following their highest excitement, when people are doing what lights them up, it amplifies everything about them. So when they're then able to put that out there and receive like a good income for it, it amplifies that. And that's how people then are able to increase their income and follow their dreams and create wealthy, abundant, significant livelihoods, businesses, enterprises, entrepreneurial skills and programs and processes and things that just fill the world with more joy and abundance and happiness. And that's the planet most of us want to live on. And of course, in many religions, many kind of fundamentalist Christian and other denominations of religion, people are passing that power over to some outer being, entity, God, whatever. And that's sort of taking our power away from our own ability as multidimensional energy beings, part of source creation energy, to create that within ourselves. And for me, some of the story I think I've shared in a previous video around like uncovering recently this belief that nothing I ever did was good enough. And this wasn't just part of being brought up in this religious idea, but also part of the parenting I received, that nothing I ever did was good enough. And having discussed this a lot recently, a lot of that actually still came from this idea that was being instilled into my mum from the religion, that that people had to behave a certain way, and young people, the little ones, had to behave a certain way, or they were naughty and disruptive and going to grow up and be terrible, rebellious people. Yeah. And I think that when I begin to unpick and unravel this and make this connection between my inner belief that nothing I ever did was ever going to be good enough, this has impacted much of, if not all of, my career path, my journey through the different employments that I've had. And interestingly, when I go back through like my career as in healthcare, when I've been in sales, hadn't thought about that one, but that also happened. I'm excellent at what I do. Always have given 110% to what I do. When I worked in a high street store, 110%. Was passed over for supervisory position. I can't remember why now that happened. It upset me because I'd have made a damn good supervisor and the pay rise was good. And that's only just occurred to me whilst thinking about the other time I was passed over for something, and that was applying to university to do my nursing degree. And I was passed over for that because I'd not been in academics for a long time. And I was actually passed over for it because of a really shit reference that came from somebody who I worked with a lot, and I was very upset that she just wrote like 3 or 4 lines to say, that yeah, I'd be a good nurse, but not actually sold me to the university intake board. Somebody else who was on that board did speak to me and said, look, all you need to do is put some stuff into writing and we'll reconsider you, because like I work with you and I know you'll be good as a nurse. But I didn't, because I was getting married, and I think I mentioned this on a previous video. I was like, I knew that I was getting married and I was going to have babies, and that was all I was really interested in. The impacts of all of those stories through life build up on this, back to me being very small, not being good enough, constantly being criticized for not sitting still, not being good, not listening enough, all of that stuff. And as I then fell into various other stories and ideas and patterns and fears and anxieties and worries about the world situation, it was really easy for me to get caught up in the stories of other people saving me, it being other people's fault that I was not being accepted or not being good enough at something, weigh me down with my own, like, I'm not good enough stories, but also due to other stories from my family, this idea that there was provision from the government. So I'm in the UK, and the government here for a long time have had a decent, we'll say, benefit state support system for people who are on low incomes. But of course, it's a bit of a trap. I've been aware of this for a while, because there's like a ceiling that they say, you know, you've got to keep your income below that ceiling, or then they take away the support they give you, which is, you know, as it should be. The problem is most people are living beyond their means, and many people who are on that, within that benefits state system, don't want to get above that income threshold. I know many people who, when their benefits end because they've gone over that income threshold, are like literally crying and despairing because they've lost their benefits. All the time for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been like, oh my goodness, I just would love to reach that threshold where I would lose my benefits, because I really don't want them, but also wasn't quite energetically putting out there that I could manage without them. All sorts of other stories that's not for this video around all of that, but for various reasons, a lot of my past had been reliant on those benefits. Without going into masses of details, my dad at 45 had took voluntary redundancy so that he could move where my grandparents were. We moved as a family when I was 4.5. He then tried for years to be employed, but he was 40, 45, pushing 50 in the 1980s. Nobody really wanted that old to be employed in the things that he wanted to do. He did so much. I watched him literally fall apart doing so much. But again, this is all stories then that I'm taking on myself of how hard he worked, until eventually one of my sisters, who was disabled, was at a point in her health where he could become a carer for her and they could let that go. But again, that's still depending on state benefits to financially provide for the family. And this is actually a story that came down. My grandparents had been in a similar, my grandfather had been on a state pension, and so there'd always been this idea then of, I remember being very small and talking, my granddad would give my mum and dad money so that his bank account didn't reach a certain point where he'd lose his state pension. And these are all stories that we take in subconsciously and unaware when we're small, that we don't necessarily understand until we get older. And these were stories that were literally a part of my very essence and my very like ancestral pattern story. Because, you know, my parents, my grandparents are my ancestors on the very like nearest level. And I don't know much about further ancestry from like my grandparents' parents, my great grandparents. Just that there may be some stories there that I don't know about in relation to finances and money and losing money for my maternal grandparents, at least. So this story followed me into my adult life. Now, there was a big period in my life where I didn't use any state benefits. I was single and working full time and had a decent wage, decent amount of money coming in. I was very happy, but there was still, now I've done so much money mindset work and looked at so many of the stories, repeating patterns in my life around money and finances that I become aware of, where I've not been where I've like sabotaged success, and where I've like felt like there was success coming, and then I've sabotaged myself so that I don't reach or push through that income ceiling. And one of them is not appealing for my nursing, to do my nursing degree, because it was like, well, I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mum then, or I'll find something else to do as a mum. That we weren't sure at the time who would be the stay-at-home mum or dad. My husband wanted to do graphic design, and we had discussed him being the stay-at-home dad and me going back, and because if I'd have gone and done my nursing, my income from nursing would have been higher than his income from administration, office administration. And his passion and interest is graphic design and art. And this was, this was something that we discussed. And then as things unfolded, and towards the end of my first pregnancy, we ended up where neither of us was working right at the end of my pregnancy. And my husband, again, interestingly, looked for work for quite a long time, and then he got some, and then he'd done a lot of agency work for a long time, and then he'd worked for a little bit, and then he'd stop, and we made do. We actually didn't apply for any state support right up until I was pregnant with my second baby, because I was receiving maternity pay, and he was getting a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there, and we made do. And to cut a long story, it's already long, to put it a little bit shorter, the story is that the dependence that we ended up on with state benefits pulled us down emotionally, energetically. I attribute some of that to why I ended up really struggling with my mental health, physically gained weight, even though I wasn't actually eating very well at all. And when I say not eating very well, I don't mean like I was eating loads of stuff that I shouldn't be. I was just not eating, and I gained weight. But that's for another video. I think I might have mentioned it in a video that's in my EFT support resources on my website. And the whole trap of it, where you don't want to get that much, because then you'll lose the money, which you'll come to in a minute, is a trap. It's literally holds people stuck at this like low income level, because they actually hate the work that they're doing anyway, don't want to do more of that work, because they're not following their passion, they're not following their interest. They don't realize, most people don't realize that you can actually make a very, very good living by creating a livelihood through doing your interests, your passions, your excitements, following what excites you. This is why there are millionaire YouTubers out there creating content, doing things that they absolutely love, and creating 6- and 7-figure incomes from that, because they're literally following their bliss, following their joy, following their excitement. And there are provisions in the world today that enable people to get paid for doing that. And that's phenomenal. And I think that's what we should be teaching young people, is how they follow your passion and your interest, so that you can do that. But undoing a lot of these money stories is actually really, really important too, for ourselves, but for them. And part of the reason why I've done so much on my money stories for the last 6 years is because I don't want to pass my money stories on to my girls. I want them to know that they can be wealthy, be abundant, have whatever they want in their lives, without it being down to how much money is in the bank or worrying about that, because the earth is abundant. Everything that we need is provided for, and 5 years is actually mismanagement by various aspects of humanity that have made things difficult. And this isn't like to diss, again, we're not dissing the wealthy people who've got the money, because we give our power away to them in a lot of cases, so that they have that control. And that's why we take our power back by building up our own resources and seeing the wealth and abundance around us all the time, from the planet, from each other. And we exchange that wealth between ourselves so that we don't need those other things, including state benefits provided by governments to keep people playing small, because they don't want us playing big. They don't want us playing big, which is why they do it. Give you a little bit of something, but don't get too much. Give you a little bit of help, but don't get too much. Because if you get too much, then you're losing it. And that's what I want to come to now. Is this year, anyone who's in the UK knows that there's like changes in the benefit system been going on for a few years, from one type of benefit for people who are working on a low income to a different type of benefit. And this has caused so much stress. It was actually the root of some of my stress 6 years ago, and I started doing all of this work maybe 7 years ago, because that is a very different benefit system to the one that we've all been used to here. There's a lot more effort expected from people to work, but not necessarily work following their interests, passions, and excitements. It's actually been criticised as a benefits system for people who are freelancers, who are holiday workers, who do things, like people who work through summer workers, like who do things that make them a lot of money in the summer, but are then like not necessarily employed with a very high income in the winter. And it for a time wasn't taking that balance into consideration. I don't know what, again, I'm doing my best to not go there. That's part of why I'm making this video. So this change in the benefit system here in the UK this year means that the support that we have previously received will stop at some point. At least that's what we're expecting, we've been told. I'm aware that what I do as an energy healer, as an holistic therapist, all of the services that I provide can more than sufficiently cover what those benefits have been, and then some. Many situations in the last few years. Bearing in mind, I began Davina Holistic Health and then Indigo Sky Holistic in 2020. Began holistic services in 2020, and then I gave it the name Indigo Sky Holistic in, I think it's 2022, when I done my Reiki. 2021, when I done my Reiki achievements level 1 and 2. There's been a lot of situations that have meant that I will increase my income slightly and then kind of sabotage myself so that it drops again. And I increase my income slightly and be like, yeah, no, we will be able to, 6 months down the line, we'll be able to ditch these benefits, and we'll be able to be without them, and then sabotage. And I've done that cyclically a few times in those 4 years since 2020. This change this year has made me sit up and look and go, right, I have to stop identifying as somebody who is dependent on these state government benefits. I have to identify as, because for so much of my life I did identify as being on them, I have to stop identifying as somebody who relies on them. If they are there and they top me up, which is kind of what the idea is, and which is why I don't generally, I'm not going to sit here and say they're wholly a bad thing. I've learned to, and I think a big part of the journey has been deeply appreciating and loving them and being so thankful that that money is in my bank every week, rather than being in the state that a lot of people are in, where they actually end, where I'm, 10 years ago, I've got Facebook statuses where I was hating them, where I was like criticizing them for not coming in the bank on time. I was criticizing having to renew them. I was criticizing this and criticizing that. That energy is what a lot of people are giving out there for these things that are there to help and support us. And interestingly, this year is the first year that I've heard people praise this alternative provision that's now coming into place this year. There's lots of people for the last, I mean, it's like 6 years, 7 years since they introduced it, have criticised it and judged it and had so many horror stories of people transferring onto it and losing money and not, not having any support, and you've got to make this weekly or fortnightly report to the Work and Pensions Agency, Department for Work and Pensions, to get them to release your funds to you so that you can survive the next month. And this year, for the first time, I've had some really good reports back from people. So much so that when I knew this was supposed to be happening later on this year, where we have to make this switch, or where we'd be expected to make the switch, I began to get these like good messages. Oh, I've got a really, really supportive like work coach that helps me with, and the people who do what I do as holistic therapists or energy healers, and they've had really supportive work coaches within the Department of Work and Pensions. And I'm like, maybe it won't be so bad. And that shift in my energy from like, oh my God, I'm dreading this. This is going to be horrible. This is going to be a nightmare. And I'm absolutely terrified, petrified of all of this, to being like, maybe I can actually just have a supportive work coach. Maybe I can actually have people who get what it is that I'm doing, and they can give me the support and the information that I need, which is what some of the friends that I've got who've had some really supportive people within the Department of Work and Pensions have like really got help and support to actually create an income that's growing while still receiving the universal credit state benefits, what it's called, to help them. Like, right, okay. And that shift changed everything. That shift actually saw me begin to see an increase in my income because I wasn't scared of making that change anymore. However, I have decided not to make that change because I know that I don't need to. I know that I can actually generate enough income from Indigo Sky Holistic, from all the services that I have available, all the knowledge that I've got that I can give to other people. I don't need to work myself into the ground even to make that difference from what we've received from the tax credits, is what it's been called, and my income, to cover that so that we can pay rent, pay bills, buy food, buy clothing, support my girls with their home education, and do all of those things without having to report to the Department of Work and Pensions every week, every fortnight, however long it is, what my income is, so that they can give me permission to have more money, just to top me up as well, because that is expected to live off that. It's like, no, I have to stop identifying as somebody who is on benefits. And that's the point of this video, is I know so many people in the same situation. And I've done this money mindset work for so long. I was bored of it last year. I was literally like, oh my God, I'm so bored of doing all this work and not seeing a significant rise in my income. And it's like, actually, this was why. Because I have learned that I had to stop identifying as somebody who was on benefits. I had to stop identifying as somebody who was scared of coming off them because of what that means. And I literally had to stop them, have them stop, to step back and go, wow, I don't actually know where this month's money is coming from, but I'm going to trust the universe to provide it for me and move past that. And I didn't actually realize, like, what I actually didn't know was how to actually be somebody who doesn't receive state benefits or state support, state help, somebody who's not high. I didn't know to actually be somebody who's not on a low income household, or whatever they like to refer to it as. I'm sure it differs from country to country, but the principle remains: whatever country you're in, if you are in the position where you're on a low income, that is how you end up identifying as somebody who's on. And so much of our behavior, our demeanor, how we carry ourselves, how we behave, comes from that energy of being a low income household. And one of the things that I have learned so deeply from my wealth coach is, and yeah, you know, on a low income, I got a wealth coach and she's amazing. And it's part of a group. So it's not like it's actually doesn't break the bank every month to be part of this collective group where I have this wealth coach. And, you know, she's amazing. I'm going to drop that link down there because this membership has I've been in it for a year, and this membership has significantly changed my life because how I feel and act because of that collective group has really changed everything. And I think for somebody who could still identify as being on a low income if I wanted to, right now, right in this minute, it's like to actually be able to go in there and go, but I can identify here as somebody who's wealthy, prosperous, who's practicing being that, even though I might actually still, to all intents and purposes, if you could look at my physical reality, seem a little bit like that's not who I am yet, has made all the difference. And what I learned through that was I had to drop a lot of the identities of myself in that low income vibration, frequency, energy, being. I had to drop that. And I had to start thinking more and acting more like, and I've learned how that looks while still only having £300 a week. I learned how that looks and how that is. And the more I did practice embodying that and changing that, and that was then what made me flip the switch in my brain that went, so I have to identify as somebody who is self-sufficient, who is bringing in the income from her livelihood now that covers all the necessities. And that's like, to cover the necessities, that's not a huge amount of money. Maybe because I've learned to live that way. And that's going to be the next, that's going to be the next step up is shifting that energy from like living just for the necessities to living a little bit past that, so that there's money that can be saved. There's money that can go into emergencies or big changes. Not emergencies. We're not manifesting emergencies. Big changes. You know, I put a crack in my induction hob to be able to replace that and not be worried and not be like, who's responsible for this, my landlady or me? Who's responsible for sorting out the decorating or the flooring or the anything else that's going on in the house, to be able to just be able to put that in and not just be barely getting by with the necessities. So that's going to be the next step up. But for now, I know that Indigo Sky Holistic can cover my necessities, the income that I receive from that, without burning myself out and without actually asking for dramatic huge amounts of money from the people who come to me. My EFT groups are £11 a week. They're £11 a session. They're £11 a group. That's something that's totally doable. Even if you want to come every week for a month, it's £39 to come to every session and get all the resources. Or you can just get all the resources for £33. Like, that's going to go up soon, by the way, as well, because there's more resources dropping in there. But anyway, and I've learned as well how to create something for somebody who identifies as this low income on this low income stream, to be able to say, right, well, I can provide you something that gives you what you need, that's supporting you, that you don't have to feel like you're overstretching yourself financially. But then where you can see the value in doing that, so that you increase your self-worth and then increase the money that you receive, so that you can actually give more money to yourself. Not necessarily give more money to me, but give more money to oneself, so that people can eat better, sleep better, have like comfortable shoes to wear, have a comfortable bed to sleep in. These are all things that really, really important to our well-being that we actually skimp on, because for some reason, somebody somewhere has made us think that we've got to make do with things that are, you know, not the best for us. So that's this little share. It's a little share of me having found my way out of the financial system of, I guess, state benefits trap from like pretty much the rest of my life into self. I don't think self-sufficiency is quite the right word, because, you know, we're not living off grid or we're not growing our own food, but where I'm creating the income for us to provide as a family. Myself and my husband are doing that through our own endeavours and skills, and not depending on this external help and validation to provide what is necessary. And from this, I'm going to make an EFT video, because I have been using EFT to help me get through this, because it is fucking scary. I'm not going to lie, getting those letters through the door saying, this is going to be the change in your situation. This benefit is stopping. This benefit will be changing. This is what you're expected to do. If you don't do this by this particular time, then this amount of money will no longer be in your bank every month or every week. That is terrifying. I'm not going to lie. Those letters, they trigger those emotions in us that have the flight or fright response, that are there maybe for a reason, from that aspect, that entity of organizational structure in the world. You know, maybe it's designed to have us in that state, because when we're in that state, we are controllable. When we're scared for our survival, we're controllable. So from this, I am going to create a very quite specific EFT video for people who want to release the benefit system, the state benefit system of the country that you're in. It may reference UK benefits specifically, but I feel like it's probably necessary at this time, because of this big shift and change that's been going on within the UK. And, you know, who knows, actually, because of elections and governmental shifts around the world at the moment, who knows what is happening, because that is, and I mean, it was like 8-9 years ago when this new form of benefit was being talked about, being brought in. It caused me so much anxiety, so much fear, so much stress. It almost caused complete mental health breakdown. It would have done if I'd not have actually started putting the work in to bring me to where I am now. It was terrifying. And so I want to create some EFT to help with that, just not necessarily to make it all perfect and amazing, and you know, so that you can suddenly go from relying on universal credit for every morsel that you're able to put into your mouth to having a 6-figure business. That's never going to happen for most people. But more to ease and hold that stress, so that what I found is I'm more open to opportunities. I'm more open to the ideas that come in mind. It never would have occurred to me to offer a group EFT session for £11 a session if I'd not have started to step out of that like fear of how things were and how things looked like they were. If I'd not have started to release all that and shift all that and let that go, to see these ways that I can provide something with a small price point that enables as many people as possible to engage in the support and offerings and wonder and amazing creations and the services and the support that I offer. It's so powerful and so amazing when you can step out of that and into your next level of being, whatever that is, whether it's with something health related, physically, whether it's an emotional or mental trauma from your past, whether it's releasing the dogma of a religious organization, whether it's post-traumatic stress, whether it's abuse, whether it's addiction. These are all things that all of the tools that I have support people through and out of, so that they can begin to see the excitement in life, the potential in their own being, like in to be able to see your own potential to create a life that's fulfilling for you. That's a gift that I can provide support towards through the tools that I've got, because that's what I've done in my own life, and that's what I'm here to bring people to, especially really busy, overwhelmed, overworked mums and dads, because that's what I can, that's what I can identify with from my own story. I have been the overworked, burnt out, stressed out mum, trying to run a business, overwhelmed, stressed out by the government's changes and systems, and trying to do what's best for my own family whilst seeing aspects of the world make it look like it's falling apart. That's where I can speak from, because that's what I've done for myself, and that's what I'm here to provide and offer support with. So love to know if you found this helpful, what your thoughts are on it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more videos, especially for that EFT for benefits release, if that is what you find going on for yourself at the moment. And I do have a 6-month offering, Rest, Surrender, Trust, which starts now on the autumn equinox, because it was going to start on the new year in September, and suddenly I was like, no, hold on, autumn equinox is a much better time to start it, because it's that midpoint of the seasons, the daylight and the dark, and we're moving into, as we go into rest, we're actually moving into those darker nights. And when we go into the surrender part of it, we'll be in the darkest part of the year, where everything is surrendering to know that things are going to get better as we move in back into the light again. So starts on the 22nd of September. Highly recommend coming and jumping into that 6-month process with me live. I'll be there for fortnightly, at least fortnightly Zoom calls, where people can jump in and join me and ask questions and get some support and mentoring and coaching through whatever's going on for your particular situation that might feel like, resting is the last thing that you can do. But it will also be available after I've completed the first, this 6 months of recording all the content on live streams. It will then be available as a evergreen process on my website as well. So that is, that's it. I'd love to know what you think. Drop any questions, any thoughts, any feelings, anything that's come up for you watching this. And if you're looking to get out of that benefits trap right now, be sure to subscribe so you can get that EFT for benefits, and get in touch, because I think this is something that is really needed to get out of that low income mindset that is keeping so many people playing small, who deserve a bigger voice and a bigger piece of humanity's recognition, because each one of us deserves to be seen more for our skills, talents and abilities, and our wisdom and our knowledge. And that is every one of us deserves to be seen more by those who we can help and support with our unique talents, gifts and experience. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.